I'd like to ask you to open your Bibles to Luke chapter 15. As you're doing that, I got a message from my wife that my granddaughter who's watching, her little 3-year-old, wanted me to say hello. So hello, Mia, and Tanner, and Camden, all the rest. Luke chapter 15, I want to just begin reading this passage. It's really a wonderful chapter of Scripture that goes so well with what we just sang about the reckless love of God. I think to understand the reckless love of God, you have to understand the typical leadership style at the time of Jesus, the typical religious tone at the time of Jesus, and we get a little glimpse of it here in the first couple verses. It says in Luke chapter 15, beginning in verse 1, "Now the tax collectors and sinners were all gathering around to hear Jesus. But the Pharisees and the teachers of the law muttered, 'This man welcomes sinners and eats with them.'" What a scene, right? You have all the sinful people, the dirty people of the world, all very excited that Jesus showed he wanted to change their lives. And then you had the religious people who were supposed to be helping those people change their lives, muttering. I love that word. You can just use your imagination if you don't know what that, muttering. They couldn't believe that this holy man, the supposed Son of God, the one we're supposed to be worshiping, is with sinners and tax collectors and prostitutes, and just hard for them to understand. Even in the non-Christian world or the non-religious world, in the pagan cultures, that'd be hard to understand too, because we always try to appease the gods to win their favor, and here was Jesus trying to win over and eat with tax collectors and prostitutes. It says, then Jesus told them this parable. Them meaning the religious folks. Suppose one of you has 100 sheep and loses one of them. Doesn't he leave the 99 in the open country and go after the lost sheep until he finds it? And when he finds it, he joyfully puts it on his shoulders and goes home. Then he calls his friends and neighbors together and says, "Rejoice with me, I have found my lost sheep." And then Jesus says, "I tell you that in the same way, there will be more rejoicing in heaven over one sinner who repents than over 99 righteous people who do not need to repent." You know, I'm glad this wasn't actually a quiz, a one-question quiz, because I would have gotten a 0. I mean, think about that question. If you're a shepherd, you're responsible for 100 sheep, 99 are compliant, they're obeying your voice, they're doing what you say, they're staying in their lane, and one stupid, idiotic, rebellious sheep decides to go off on his own. Should you leave the 99 who are safe and in your care and listening to you and to go after that one? I would say no. That would have been my answer. That sounds stupid. 99 is a great grade for a shepherd. I read something this morning about this passage, and it said that in that culture, there's no way one family would have 99 or 100 sheep. That it would be likely that the wealthier families might have 15 sheep, but many families would just maybe have 2. And so this shepherd who would have been asked to care for all these sheep, it's quite possible that he's having to make a choice. You only have 2 sheep, and one of them just got away. And if you're a shepherd after God's own heart, you know what a loss that would be to that family for even one to get away. Jesus doesn't work the odds. A 99 grade is not good enough for him. You know, I don't think it makes sense to leave the 99 unless you see yourself as the one. You know, communion is a time where us ones come to celebrate that the Good Shepherd was willing to go anywhere to save us. You know, I don't know where he went to find you. I know where he went to find me. I know my attitude toward him for most of my life was rebellion. It was wanting to do my own thing, wanting to live in a dangerous part of wanting to explore what I wanted to explore. I think about today as I prepare to take communion, where my life would be today if he had not left the 99 to go after me. The reckless love of God has also chased you down. The reckless love of God fought until you were found. The reckless love of God said there's no dark place he wouldn't be willing to go to shine light to find you. There's no wall he wouldn't kick down. There's no lie he wouldn't tear down coming after you. So whether you have been found by Jesus or not, or whether you're still lost, know this. If you are still lost, he's coming after you. He will relentlessly pursue you as long as it takes. You know, Guy Hammond shared his story over the weekend, and I don't know if we'll get a little bit of it now, but he talked about how long and deliberately and recklessly God spent going after him, going into the dark places that he went, just pursuing. It only seems reckless, that love, if you don't know the outcome. But for the joy set before him, Jesus endured the cross, scorning its shame, and now sits down at the right hand of the Father, celebrating, filled with joy because of the ones who remember what he did for them today. You know, I want to rejoice too at the ones. I want to rejoice about this one. I want to rejoice about these ones. All that have been found because of the reckless love of God. You know, communion is a time we come together. We don't feel better than the person sitting next to us because we sinned in a different way. We feel humbled that Christ was willing to give it all up to save each one of us. Let's pray to our gracious God. Father, I want to first just express my deep gratitude for the places you had to go and the number of times you had to go there to pull me out of my rebellious and dark ways. God, to see this story and to imagine this picture that Jesus tried to paint for the Pharisees and the teachers of the law of Christ, the Good Shepherd, not stopping until he found us, picked us up, put us on his shoulders, came back and said, let's celebrate. Father, I know as a sinful man, I don't imagine heaven celebrating. But this is what the scriptures say. And Jesus said it over and over again in this chapter. He compared it to a poor woman who had lost a valuable coin and just wouldn't stop until she found it. And the rejoicing that came about from finding that lost coin. And then the very gripping story that we all are very familiar with of the rebellious son who is like that wandering sheep that just went a very different direction than his father had ever imagined. And yet when that son was finally found and rescued and brought back on the shoulders of Christ, there was a great banquet in heaven. Father, we participate in this banquet feast right now, remembering the effects that Christ's sacrifice has had on us. Thank you, Father, that you don't just accept us, that you embrace us and want to have this meal with us. We pray in Christ's name, amen.
All right, good morning, everyone. Wow, so good to be here. Thank you for your kind invitation. I really have been enjoying my time here at Northview the last few days. And so honored to be with you. If you could go ahead and bring up my slides there, that would be great. Thank you. Just by way of introduction, for those of you who don't know who I am, my name is Guy Hammond. I am a Canadian evangelist and also the executive director of this organization that I started several years ago called Strength in Weakness Ministries. Its primary purpose is to help Christians who are homosexually attracted, to give them strategies and support and help to live a faithful life to follow Jesus. And we also try to educate Christians on how to share the good news of Jesus with our gay friends and neighbors. I just felt, many years ago, I felt like this was a topic that most Christians were avoiding. Not because we don't care. I think we care. We're a loving group of people. The problem wasn't that we don't care. The problem was we didn't know what to say. And so I just thought, the problem isn't, a homophobic problem. The problem is an education problem. And so I just felt like the LGBTQ people in our lives deserved better than what the church was offering. And so I started this ministry, not really actually anticipating on it becoming very much. Initially I was trying to find 20 or 30 people to help. But then we found 30 same-sex attracted Christians in the church in the first couple of days, and then it went past 100, and then it was past 500, then it was past 1,000, and since then, that was like back in 2006. Finally, by 2012, I was the evangelist of a church in Eastern Canada called Halifax, and I was leading the church there, but this thing just got so big. I mean, we're so overwhelmed just by the sheer volume of people contacting us for help. I was like, man, I can't continue to lead a church and do this strength and weakness gig, so my wife and I, Kathy, we decided to quit our jobs and just do this. But the problem was we just quit our jobs. There was no support. There was no church out there going, oh, we'll help you. Like, no, I was on my own. And so we were like, well, we still have bills to pay and a mortgage and an F-150 in the driveway that was falling apart, but I still owed a little bit of money on it. And I'm like, and I got 4 kids and a barking dog. And I'm like, how am I going to do all this, Anyway, we just started going around to friends. That's when you find out who your friends are really fast, when you start going around asking for money. And then we started going to churches just saying, hey, listen, will you please partner with us? If you recognize the need for a ministry like this within our brotherhood of churches, then will you help us? So since 2012, we just lived on donations. I never know from year to year how we're going to make it financially. Our tagline has been, if it's the Lord's will, it's the Lord's bill. I don't know how we're going to make it financially, but God takes care of it. And so as you heard, in the little communion talk, the little contribution talk we had there, that you are supporting me. For the last few years you have, and I just want to express my appreciation. You may not know this side of heaven the thousands of people that you're helping, but they are in the thousands. Strength and Weakness is now helping thousands of Christian men and women of all ages and demographics who are homosexually attracted, dealing with transgender issues, moms and dads of gay kids, that kind of thing. We're helping thousands of people in over 90 countries in 3 languages, and the ministry has just really exploded. And of course, we're continuing to get people to follow the traditional biblical sexual ethic. And so we're countercultural, and we're often not popular with a lot of people. Sometimes even the Christians are mad at me. I seem to be in the unenviable place of everybody being upset with me because the stuff we talk about is so controversial. But listen, certainly my understanding of what the Bible teaches on sexual ethics is that sexual intimacy is reserved between that of a man and a woman bound together only in marriage. Anything outside of that is certainly not what God intended for human sexuality. Not a popular message in today's anything goes world. Nevertheless, what I believe the Bible to teach. So we're constantly pushing people towards Jesus and the saving grace that he provides, and teaching a multifaceted countercultural message. So we need help, and we certainly need financial help, but we also need your prayers. So thank you for having me. Thank you to the senior leadership here, certainly the Lenahans and the eldership and whatnot, for saying, hey, let's help this guy out a little bit. Very, very grateful for that. The reason that kind of I do what I do is because I lived a gay life. I started participating in homosexuality when I was 12 years old, and it's something that continued until I was in my mid-20s. I don't know where it came from. I never met anybody who chose what they're attracted to. I think attractions are very automatic and involuntary. We don't really choose what we're attracted to. Now, but we are 100% responsible for what we do with our attractions. That we're responsible for. Anyway, I discovered around the age of 12 that I was attracted to guys. I don't know why. I will tell you as a point of personal history, I was sexually molested by a man when I was 8 years old. It was actually by a police officer. And, that certainly didn't help, I'm sure. But anyway, I knew that in the church that my parents took me to, I could not talk about this. I mean, the only message I heard at church was that, gay people were wicked and evil and going to hell. That was the message. And so while I was dealing with this, I just felt like, man, I got nowhere to go. My dad was a really nice guy, but very homophobic, and made it really clear how he felt about gay people in the house. And I was like, man, I got nowhere to go. So my teen years were very lonely. I felt very lonely and isolated. I felt like I'm all by myself here. It was also during those years, though, I started a relationship with a kid that I went to school with, and he ended up being my boyfriend for about 10 years. His name was Carl, good guy. And anyway, I had this relationship with Carl. By the time this picture was taken here at the age of 19, I was really giving up on God, church, and Bible, and thought, there's no place for me in the church. It's not that I didn't believe in God, I just didn't think God believed in me. And so I moved to Toronto, Canada's largest city, started crossing a lot of dangerous lines, a lot of anonymous sexual encounters with men, that kind of thing. And by the time I was 22 years old, I had acted out hundreds of times with different guys. And I knew I needed some help, some intervention. I didn't know where to go. But of course, in God's perfect timing, he sent somebody who invited me to church. I was like, oh, church. I know all about those people. They're all homophobes and bigots and self-righteous and judgmental, and there's nothing for me at church. But this guy kept bugging me, and I was like, all right, I'll go to your church. It was called the Toronto Church of Christ. I was like, all right, get off my case. I'll go to your church. I went, and I loved it. I was like, oh my gosh, this church is great. It wasn't at all like the church I grew up in. Thought, I'm going to keep coming here and see what this is about. But it took 2 years. 2 years of hearing the message, 2 years of building relationships with Christians, 2 years learning about Jesus, all still living my gay life. And after 2 years, I was like, there's something about this Jesus fella. And let's be honest, guy. You've done everything you could think of in the last 12, 13 years of your life to make yourself happy and fulfilled. And your life is a mess. Your life is a train wreck. And so haven't you been doing it your way long enough? Maybe we need to consider this Jesus thing. And so I asked the brothers there in the church to study the Bible with me, and they did. Had a lot of repenting to do, obviously. I broke up with my boyfriend, made the decision that I wanted Jesus more than I wanted homosexuality, and was baptized on August 15th, 1987, 35 years ago. And I can tell you, I have not, amen, I've not participated in any kind of homosexual activity since my conversion 3.5 decades ago. But here's the thing. I don't know why God works the way he does, but the thing is that I'm still attracted to men. Hasn't even altered. I'm just as attracted to guys today as the day I became a Christian 35 years ago. For the first several years of my life, of my Christian life, that caused me a lot of angst and grief, and really tried to figure out how to become heterosexually attracted. But after about 15 years of trying to figure that out, I was like, you know what? I'm going to give up on this. This pursuit of trying to be attracted to girls, it's impoverishing my faith. It's discouraging. It's not working. And besides that, I can't find any scripture that says that I have to be heterosexually attracted to be a Christian. So why am I worried about this? So I stopped worrying about it. And, I just, now I believe that God's answer to this is, Guy, my grace is sufficient for you and my power is made perfect in weakness. And I don't worry about what I'm attracted to. Here's the thing. I don't think God cares about what any of us are attracted to. That's right. I mean, the reality is if we were all to stand up in here today, every single one of us, and announce publicly, honestly, what we're all attracted to, this room would get dark really fast. Right? We're all a mess. We're all broken. Let me tell you, fortunately, I do not suffer from the tragedy of perfection, okay? I don't know what it is about us Christians. We all want to appear like we're perfect all the time. Listen, you're not perfect and I'm not perfect. We all know it. So why are we trying to pretend that we are, right? I mean, the Jesus' church is a spiritual hospital for spiritually sick people. That's why we're here. I mean, if you don't need Jesus, if you're perfect and you have it all figured out already, you're at the wrong place today. I don't understand perfect people. I see perfect people all the time at church. People have got it all figured out. Like, there's this guy at my church that I go to, and I've been seeing this guy every year for 20 years, every week for 20 years. And every time I see him, I'm like, hey, how you doing today? Great. Every week, I'm doing great. For 20 years, man, this guy's been doing great. Like, I don't understand you. You never confess any sins. You don't talk about anything. Your family's always doing great. Your kids are always doing great. Your finances are always doing great. You know, your hair is great. You know, I'm like, I cannot relate to you, man. I don't understand. You know those kinds of people that, you do? Oh, me too. Good. You know those kinds of people that, you know, you go into their house and all the magazines are perfectly straight. And their house smells like candles. You know those kinds of people? Who are you, man? Or you get in their car, and there's no coffee cups on the floor or anything. Like, everything's vacuumed. I'm like, I don't understand perfect people, man. Listen, we're all broken. We're all a mess. Jesus' church needs to be a safe and loving environment for everybody. What hospital picks and chooses what kind of sick people will come in to the emergency ward? No, what kind of hospital would say, oh, only if you got a broken arm or a broken limb or a headache do you come into this hospital, but if you have other illnesses, no, not at this hospital. What kind of hospital would that be? A hospital takes all kinds of illnesses. That's what Jesus' church should be, because Jesus is the great physician and he's here to heal everybody, right? We all need Jesus. So who cares if you're gay? Who cares if you're transgender? Who cares if you're bi? Who cares if you're a thief? Who cares if you cheat on your taxes? Who cares if you slander and gossip? Listen, we all need Jesus. That's why we're here. And so we just need to do everything we can. And I can see that Northview is really trying this. Like, I really applaud you. You're trying to be a safe and loving environment for everybody to come and learn what it means to follow Jesus. And, you know, this would have been a good church for Guy Hammond to come to 35 years ago, to experience Jesus over the 2 years that it took me to be able to find out how to live my life. So I'm so glad, so encouraged by the changes that you're making. You know, one thing that I never thought that would happen is that I'd get married. I was like, wow, I've never had a girlfriend before, never kissed a girl. I don't know. What would you do with a girl? I'm not really sure. So I was like, becoming a Christian, I just thought, okay, well, it's really clear to me you can't be gay and a Christian, so I guess I'll just, you know, be celibate for my whole life. Not my first choice, but I thought, okay, I'll do that. Jesus can die for me. I can stay celibate. And then I met this girl in the church, and, you know, over a couple of months, you know, we just built this great friendship, and I was like, man, I love being with her. I really can't imagine my life without her. And every time I went to her house, she would bake me something. And as you could tell, that was very impressive to me. And so I was like, I really want this girl in my life. Now, it's true, I wasn't sexually attracted to her because I'd never been sexually attracted to a girl before. But I was like, just because I'm not sexually attracted, does that mean that I get left out of this opportunity to be able to share all that life has to offer with somebody? Like, okay, I'm deficient in this one area, but, you know, there's so many other things I am attracted to her in. And so we talked about it, and I asked her to marry me, and she said yes. And you know, Kathy and I were married for 28 amazing years. I have had 4 kids, 2 that we had naturally, and then 2 we adopted. And I love showing that picture of my family, because that's a miracle to me. There's no way that a guy who was, you know, having anonymous gay sex with men in parked cars in public bathrooms and doing all the crazy stuff that I was doing up until the age of 24 should, you know, get to have this. And so, you know, I just think, you know, God is so amazing. And I love showing that picture because my kids are, you know, I've got such an amazing relationship with all of them, and I just feel so blessed by God. Sadly, a couple of years ago, Kathy was diagnosed with stage 4 brain cancer. And that really, you know, shook our world. She just woke up we had just been traveling. We had been doing a tour of the churches in Scandinavia. We were just about to go to Brazil. We had like a 2-week span before we went to Brazil. And we were at home in Canada, and Kathy was like, something's wrong. And I was like, what is it? He goes, I don't know, something's really off. And I'm like, well, you're exhausted, that's what's wrong. Like, just get some sleep. The next day, she woke up and she couldn't open her left eye or move her left arm. And so we were like, okay, something's up. So of course, we got her to the hospital, and they were like, hey, listen, you have stage 4 brain cancer. There isn't anything we can do. So you've got 6 months to a year. And so this picture was taken about 4 or 5 months before Kathy died. And, you know, it's just, I feel so honored that I got to live with her and have her in my life. And she was just really, really special. You know, she was very pragmatic, though. About 2 weeks before she died, she called me into the hospital room and she said, honey, would you please promise me you'd get married again? I'm like, oh my gosh. Honey, come on, I'm 55. Where am I going to find a wife at this age? Like, I got one of those cruises or something? Like, I'm not I'm not doing that. And it's like, can you also remember, like, I'm not even attracted to women? And she was so insistent that she made a list of pre-approved names of women that I could marry. And at the top of the list was a lady by the name of Laura. And she said, marry Laura or one of these other women. And I was like, okay, I'll try. Anyway. But 6 months after Kathy died, I started feeling lonely, so I called Laura up. Her husband had died of cancer too. So she was a widower. I called her up and said, hey, listen, I didn't have time to beat around the bush, man. I'm in my mid-50s here. I'm not going to almost say something like, so even before the appetizers arrived, I just said, listen, your husband is dead and my wife is dead. You're lonely and I'm lonely, and there's a list. And you're on it. You're number one. I just said, listen, I'm starting at the top and I'm working my way down. Someone's going to say yes to all this, right? Anyway, she obviously said yes. Laura and I have now been married for 3 years. We're very happily married. Some of you are going, it can't be. No, it's true. We are happily married. And just so grateful for her. So I kind of consider myself to be a walking, living, breathing miracle. I'm not even attracted to women, and I've got 2 wives now, right? Like, that's really something. So anyway, yeah, here's the thing, guys. Let me just say this, and I have a short little lesson, some things I want to share with you. But let me just say this. Listen, again, I don't think God cares about what we're attracted to. What I tell people all the time is the opposite of homosexuality is not heterosexuality. For the Christian, the opposite of homosexuality is holiness. Who cares what you're attracted to? So what? Amen. Listen, God loves you. He cares about you. He wants you to be in a relationship with Him. The biggest problem that people have in their lives isn't that they're gay or trans or bi or anything else. The biggest problem in their life is that they don't have a relationship with Jesus. Right. So whatever the gig is, listen, give your life to the Lord. There's no reason why you can't live an incredibly amazing life that honors God, no matter what your area of brokenness and attraction is. And so my calling, a lot of times, especially teens will go, listen, I'm gay or I'm bi or I'm trans or whatever. There's no place for me in the church. It's this. There's the church and there's me and there's this. No place for me in the church. I'm like, that's ridiculous. No, it's this. Because I'm telling you, Jesus' church is not complete without LGBTQ people being a part of it. We need these people in the church. And I'm living and breathing proof, and so are the thousands of others who belong to my ministry, that you can be attracted to the same gender and live an amazing, successful Christian life. So don't let anybody tell you different. I want to tell you a story to start off this little lesson. There's an ancient legend about a Persian king who was discouraged, dejected, and sad. And he called for all of his chief advisors and wise men and court wizards, and he charged them to invent a motto that would ease his pain in times of difficulty. And he imposed 3 conditions relative to the wording of this motto. Number 1, not only did it have to encourage him in times of trouble, but secondly, the sentiment also had to be appropriate to keep him humble and grateful during times of prosperity and happiness. Thirdly, the motto had to be concise enough to be engraved on a ring, which he intended to always wear on his middle finger. So the wise men, they all got together and they thought and they planned and they schemed, but nobody could come up with such a concise motto. Finally and unexpectedly, the king's daughter presented him with a ring bearing these magic words: "Even this shall pass away." In other words, nothing lasts forever. Not sorrow, not fame, not fortune, not pain. Nothing lasts forever. And if it's true that all good things must come to an end, then can it also be true that all bad things must come to an end? Now, problems and difficulties and challenges, they surround us, don't they? This has always been the case throughout human history. I don't think there's ever been a time in my life when all my problems are gone. Like, as soon as you think you've solved one problem, another one pops up. Problems surround us. I don't think there's ever a time where I've gone, gee, everything is perfect. And it requires faith and courage just to live a regular life these days. Yes, right. Troubles come in different forms and in different measures, don't they? More month than money, unemployment, difficulty in relationships, that aching back, that broken down car, that visa bill whose amount due never seems to decrease, when you're lonely or feel isolated, when we're filled with guilt or shame, when people we trust disappoint us, when we feel like the church has let us down, or when we disappoint ourselves, or when we can't seem to move those mountains, no matter how hard we pray. I mean, these are challenges that everyone here this morning is familiar with from one degree to another. But then there are those other times when life gets really serious and we face life-altering crisis, a critical illness in yourself or someone that you love, bankruptcy, separation, divorce, chronic pain, failure, addiction, depression, the death of a loved one. You see, when crises like these enter our world, I think it's helpful for us to remember that God has designed it so that we can recover. You know, whatever the crisis is, even this shall pass away. And we see this all throughout the Bible, actually. You know, in the book of Job, one of his so-called friends was a guy by the name of Zophar. Now, when you read the story of Job, he had these three supposed friends. They were terrible friends. You don't want these guys in your life. And they weren't the brightest lights in the harbor. The elevator didn't go all the way to the top. They were always one Brady short of a bunch. Like, okay, so these guys, half of you don't even know what I just said. Okay. But, you know, even a stopped clock is right twice a day. And so Zophar actually did utter one prophetic truth in Job's life. In Job 11:16, he said, Job, I know you're covered in boils. I know you're scraping them off with a piece of pottery. I know your wife is like, wah, 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 like, I get it. But listen, you will surely forget your trouble, recalling it only as waters gone by. In other words, Job, even this will pass away. Have you ever committed a sin? Remember that, there's the perfect guy, right there. There he is. Have you ever committed a sin so grievous that you thought you could never be forgiven or recover? You know, David had that feeling after King David committed adultery with Bathsheba and then had her husband murdered on the front lines in war. The Lord said this regarding the punishment that David would face in 1 Kings 11:39. He said, okay, you know what? I will humble David's descendants because of this, but not forever. In other words, even my punishment will pass away. Regarding how God treats all of us after a time of rebellion and sin, it says in Psalm 30, verse 5, for his anger lasts only a moment, but his favor lasts a lifetime. Weeping may stay in the night, but rejoicing comes in the morning. Even this shall pass away. So it is a biblical truth that nothing in this world, no problem, trouble, or crisis lasts forever. I believe this is a gift from God. And it needs to encourage us in the middle of our troubles. It means that no adversary, no trial, no temptation, no crisis is permanent. All suffering is temporary. We go through a lot of stuff. God, what about physical pain? Ever had a migraine headache that you thought it will never go away? It did. Ever had a broken bone, a twisted ankle, a sty in your eye, bad toothache, some surgery you thought you'd never heal from? You did. Ever had that cold that just seemed to go on and on and on? You thought, I'm never going to stop coughing. You did. And at those times when nothing else seems to help, not the power of positive thinking, not drugs, not anything, at such times God wants to remind you that no pain lasts forever. Job's discomfort was only temporary. The boils did eventually leave him. Even Christ's agony on the cross, mercifully, lasted only 6 hours. What about anxiety? Boy, watching the news can cause a little bit of anxiety, can't it? Yet I can tell you that whatever the whole world is upset about today, it'll soon be forgotten. You know, if I were to say the word Vietnam in this crowd, to one demographic, you would think of one of the most brutal wars ever fought and the deaths of over 1.5 million people. Yet there are others from another demographic in this room who would likely think of a place with an exotic culture with amazing beaches and a place you'd love to go on vacation at someday. Events that once caused the world tremendous anxiety in years past are long gone. They're almost forgotten. Even 9/11 is now taught as history. What about temptation? You know, even here, God promises relief. No temptation lasts forever. You know, there was a time in Jesus' life when he was tempted by the devil himself. I can't imagine that. I don't know exactly how it works. Like, you know, when you get tempted, is it you know, always the devil himself, you know, or does he just sometimes send down like some demons and he's like, hey, you go after this guy and you go after this guy and you go get Guy Hammond. Like, I don't know if the devil's ever personally visited Guy Hammond. But, you know, here, Jesus got personal attention from the top dog himself, the president of the company. And time again, Satan tried his best to get Jesus to sin, but time and time again, Jesus held on to righteousness and he refused to give in. And it tells us in Luke 4:13, when the devil had finished all his tempting. Now you think about that. All his tempting. Wow. He left him for a more opportune time. In other words, for Jesus, the temptations eventually did stop. Satan waited for a more opportune time. A lot of times we think when we're tempted with things, I just have to do it. No, you don't understand how my wife just talked to me. You don't understand how my husband just talked to me. You don't understand what my parents just said. I just have to have that toothpaste out of the tube moment. I'm going to yell and scream and slam some doors and maybe hit something. Rah! I just have to. No, you don't. Shut up. Would you just calm down for a minute? Like, one of the things that I think would help us during times of temptation is, can you just consider the consequences? Yeah. Okay, if I say all the things I want to say, what kind of damage am I going to cause in the relationships I have with the people I care about most? Sometimes you say things, and you can't take that stuff back. You can go back and apologize. People will forgive you, but man, you better be careful. I don't understand. I just have to look at that website. I just got to go there. I mean, I can't stop myself. Yes, you can. Close the stinking computer. The temptation will eventually leave. It's not going to stay there forever. If you just hang on for a minute or two, okay, it'll leave. Oh, but it will come back again. Okay, well, then you'll deal with it then. You take it one step at a time. But you're not a slave to this stuff. No, well, you don't understand. Mama, she always gossiped and slandered, and I just gossip and slander too. And so when I hear something, I just want to talk about it. And so I just heard about this person in the church, and I just got to call like 6 people and tell them about it. Oh, be quiet. Listen, control yourself. You have the power to say no to sexual impurity, fantasy, gossip, slander. You don't have to cheat on your taxes. Listen, calm yourself down. Just consider the consequences. In a few minutes, the temptation will gone. It may come back again, but you'll deal with it one step at a time. What about sorrow? Well, that's a different kind of pain, isn't it? Sometimes more hurtful than any kind of physical suffering we can endure. Sometimes, you know, you can go through a grief that is so intense it makes you physically ill. Have you ever been there when you can't eat? You can't sleep. You can't face people because you're so emotionally disoriented. Yeah, I've been there. I've heard some of your stories. I know you have too. You know, as I watched my wife Kathy live her final years, the one thing that she taught me was that there was no circumstance so dire, no problem so great, No difficulty so challenging that it should give us an excuse to stop living out our Christian faith. Kathy was, after she got sick, about a few months in, she started declining pretty quickly. By about January of 2018, she was pretty much bound to a wheelchair. And the Toronto Church of Christ is a large church of about 1,400 people, and they only meet together as an entire congregation, 2 or 3 times a year. The rest of the time they meet in these little zones. And so one of these things were taking place in Toronto where the whole church was going to get together. And Kathy knew this would be her last church service. And we lived about 2 hours away. So Kathy was like, well, I want to go to that. I was like, honey, you know what? It's a long way. You're in a wheelchair. It's exhausting. You know what? We'll just stay at home. We'll have our own little church service. She was like, no, I want to go. I was like, no, honey, we're not going. She goes, I'm going. I was like, okay, well then maybe we'll just put the wheelchair in the back of the pickup and we'll go. Anyway, so we went to this thing. It was great, and on our way home, I was in the front seat driving, of course. Kathy was sitting beside me, and my son Greg was in the back. And anyway, Kathy went into this full seizure where she just kind of curled up and started convulsing, and her hands took these weird shapes, and she was out of control. And Greg is screaming in the back seat, and I'm like, okay, I got to get to a hospital. What am I going to do here? So I was already going like 120 kilometers an hour, and I'm driving. I was like, well, if I go on, I don't want to cause an accident. Okay, I'm pulling off the side of the highway, and I'm dialing 911. An ambulance shows up pretty quickly. She was still convulsing. They put her in the back of the ambulance. The ambulance driver says, follow us. So I follow this ambulance to the local hospital. By the time I had parked and gotten in there, Kathy was lying on a gurney in the hallway, and the seizures had stopped, but she was exhausted. And the ambulance attendant, who had been in the back of the ambulance with her, helping her while she convulsed, came up to the gurney, and he said, Mrs. Hammond, listen, I'm going back on my shift. You're in good hands. The doctor will see you in a moment. But listen, I just wanted to come back and say goodbye. I just want you to know I will never forget what you told me in the back of that ambulance. And so thank you so much. And he walked away. So I looked down at Kathy. I was like, what did you say to the guy in the back of the ambulance? And she said, well, in between one of my seizures, I told him that I was doing fine, actually, that I was dying, and I was fine with this because I'm a Christian, I love Jesus, and I'm not afraid to die because I know where I'm going. And I said to him, listen, what you need to do is you need to get a Bible and read it and find yourself a church to go to so that when it comes your time to die, you'll be as confident as I am. So I'm looking at her and I'm like, who are you? Like, I haven't invited anybody to church in months. And here you are sharing your faith in between convulsions. I'm like, that is crazy to me. That same month, actually, we live in a little town. There's a lake in our town. And of course, I live in Canada, so it freezes over, and my kids like to play hockey on it and whatnot in the winter. And so that same month, I was sitting up in my office working, and my son, Wyatt, he calls upstairs and goes, hey, Dad. Yeah. Hey, I'm going to go down to the lake and play some hockey. I'm like, all right. So, but a minute later, he calls back up and goes, hey, Dad. What? Mom wants to go skating too. Tell her no. But a minute later, Wyatt comes back. Hey, Dad. What? You better get down here. I go downstairs. What are you doing? She's trying to get a coat on. I'm like, honey, it's like minus 20 out. You have brain cancer. You're in a wheelchair. We're not going down to the lake. And she was like, why not? Come on. I was like, we can't put skates on you. She's like, no, can't somebody just push me around in the wheelchair? I'm like, oh my gosh, you're killing me. I was like, all right. So we all got our coats on. I didn't want to go down to the lake just out of self-preservation. Who wants to go at minus 20 degree weather? We get down to the lake, and she was in the wheelchair. We drove the truck right out onto the lake, and my son is pushing her in the wheelchair, and she's like, whoo-hoo, she's just loving it. And I'm like, man, you're unbelievable. fast forward about 5 months, in the same lake this happened. The doctor came in and said, this is it. She has days, maybe a week, but this is it. You need to get ready. Could happen at any time now. So by now, Kathy was completely paralyzed except for the movement of one arm. So all she could do was move one arm. Everything else was paralyzed. She could barely speak. And I said, honey, is there anything you want to do before you die? And she said, I want to go swimming. I thought she was going to ask for a popsicle or something, you know? So I went out to the doctor. I said, can you go in and talk to her? Her dying wish is to swim. Obviously, we can't do that. The doctor said, why not? I was like, well, she's paralyzed. She hasn't been out of this bed in a couple of months. She's about to die. And the doctor was like, what's the worst that could happen? I was like, you bring up a good point. So we hired a 6-man ambulance crew who went right into the water with her. And we got her mother, her elderly mother, and her brothers and sisters, and my kids, and some Christians together. We turned it into a picnic. We all went down to that very same lake where 6 months earlier she had been skating. And we dropped her into the water, and she only could move one arm. But, she just moved that one arm. While we held on to her, her dying wish was fulfilled, and she died a week later. As I watched Kathy die, I learned that you can still live your Christian faith, even in the midst of tragedy. A couple months before she died, we have all these supporters, and a lot of people were asking, well, how's she doing? We thought, well, let's do a little interview with her just so we can tell people how she is. And I'm just going to play 3 minutes of it here for you, so you can kind of see Kathy's heart and attitude just months away from dying. The question that's being asked is, what kind of legacy do you want to leave your kids? And this is her response. Let's play that now. What you were going to see next was a video that we took of Kathy swimming just before she died. So here's the thing, guys. I know that your life is difficult. I know your problems are real. I know that the challenges you face are heartbreaking sometimes. But you can still share your faith. Amen. You can still be kind. You can still help others. You can still forgive. You can still be positive in your spirit and outlook in life and serve your community. And you can still live out your Christian faith. In fact, if there was ever a time to let your light shine to a lost and dying world, it's at a time of crisis. Yep. It's when we as Christians are in crisis to show this world, who's terrified of crisis, that we are not of this world. So, what's your problem this morning? Financial insecurity, perhaps. Even this shall pass away. Unhappy romance, perhaps. Even this shall pass away. A broken home, perhaps. Even this shall pass away. Unemployment. Maybe you're in school fearing you'll never pass or graduate. Trust me, even this shall pass away. Are you lonely this morning? Are you grieving the loss of a loved one? Even this shall pass away. Listen, folks. All life is fleeting. Remember this, only heaven lasts forever. Only love lasts forever. Only God is from everlasting to everlasting. Only His Son, Jesus Christ, our Savior, is without end. And it is these things that the Christian pins his and her hopes. Because these are the divine things, and these things will never pass away. Meanwhile, this side of the grave, nothing lasts forever. Not your physical pain, your emotional pain, your anxieties, your temptations, even your terminal illnesses, like the ancient Persian king who needed daily reminders, we too need to keep reminding ourselves that amid our crisis, even this shall pass away. Brothers and sisters, listen, this is the first time I've ever been here. I've heard about you for many years. I've heard about your faith. I've heard about the impact you're having in this community. I've heard great things about all of you. I've been inspired by your faith, and I've been certainly inspired and encouraged by your generosity. But I can't tell you how special it has been for me now not just to hear about your faith, but actually get to see it face to face. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.